Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work full time while my husband does the same, so during the summer, our kids stay home under the watchful eye of my parents, who check in on them regularly. My stepdaughter just turned 17, and she's incredibly responsible for her age. She helps look after her younger siblings and rarely gives us any trouble. Yesterday started like any normal Tuesday. I was halfway through my lunch break when my phone rang. It was my stepdaughter asking if she could have a friend over to hang out by the pool. This was completely normal. She always asks permission first, which is one of the reasons we trust her so much. I told her, of course, she could have a friend over, but asked if it was just the one friend. She said yes, just Josie, and they were planning to swim for a bit and maybe watch a movie later. I said it sounded perfect and told her to have fun. I went back to eating my sandwich, thinking nothing more of it. My dad was scheduled to stop by around 2 to check on the kids, like he always does. What happened next turned my peaceful lunch break into complete chaos. My phone rang again about an hour later. This time it was my dad, and he sounded confused and a little angry. He told me he needed to talk to me about what was happening at my house right now. I asked what was wrong. He explained that he had pulled into my driveway and there were 4 cars full of teenagers right behind him. When he got out, one of them yelled at him asking if he could help them. He asked what they needed, and this kid said they were here to use the pool because my stepdaughter said she was having a pool party. I knew my stepdaughter would never do something like this without asking. I told my dad that she only asked if one friend could come over, and Josie was supposed to be the only one. He said that's what he figured. He told them all to wait outside while he went to find her. When he asked her about it, she looked shocked and said she never mentioned anything about a party. She said it was just supposed to be Josie coming over. I asked what he told the other kids. He said he told them they needed to leave, except for Josie since he knew her family. They weren't happy about it. They started calling him a party pooper and flipping him off when they drove away. I was furious but tried to stay calm since I was still at work. My dad said he'd handle it and call me back if anything else happened. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Another girl had shown up asking where everyone else was. When my dad questioned her, she admitted she was the one who told everyone there was a pool party. The girl had the nerve to act like it was completely normal. My dad recognized her as the granddaughter of 2 people he and my mom have breakfast with every Saturday. He told her the pool wasn't even ready for swimming and that she needed to leave. Instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, this girl told my dad to F off. A 17-year-old girl cursing at my 70-year-old father because he wouldn't let her throw an unauthorized party at our house. My stepdaughter came outside. She was livid. My stepdaughter yelled at the girl asking what was wrong with her. She told Karen she never said she could have a party there and that she needed to leave right now. Karen said whatever and called my dad a total jerk about the whole thing. She said everyone knew my stepdaughter had a pool. My stepdaughter said she didn't care what everyone knew. She told Karen this was her family's house and she couldn't just show up uninvited and expect to use their stuff. Karen said my stepdaughter was being dramatic and that it was just a pool. My stepdaughter told her to get out of there before she called the police herself. Karen left, but not without making more rude comments. After she was gone, Josie explained what had happened. She said Karen had asked to ride with her to our house, and when Josie got permission to come over, Karen took it upon herself to invite a bunch of other people without checking with anyone. I was proud of my stepdaughter for standing up to Karen and supporting my dad. My dad said he planned to have a conversation with Karen's grandparents during their Saturday breakfast. That weekend, my parents stopped by with an update from their breakfast meeting. They had spoken with Karen's grandparents about what happened. My dad asked his friends what could possibly make their granddaughter think she was entitled to lie about my stepdaughter hosting a pool party. The grandfather explained that Karen had been having a difficult year due to her parents' separation. Without both parents consistently present, she'd been acting out more frequently to get attention and caused trouble wherever she went. Karen's grandfather said she'd been in trouble for shoplifting recently and last week she got gas at a full service station, then drove off without paying once her tank was full. He said every time they confronted her about her behavior, she screamed that she was entitled to do whatever she wanted. Karen's grandmother said her father was never like this growing up. She said Karen's entitled attitude was completely ridiculous. They had warned her multiple times to stop acting this way and causing problems where there weren't any before. They explained that both of Karen's parents were trying their best to show her that the divorce didn't mean she was less loved, but she wasn't listening to anyone. My dad looked his friends straight in the eye and said something that made me incredibly proud of him. He told them that the next time she did anything to mess with his step-grandchildren or showed up at their house uninvited, he was calling the police and suggesting she spend some time in jail. He said he was surprised she hadn't ended up there already with all the trouble she'd been causing. Karen's grandparents agreed that something needed to be done before her behavior escalated further. They promised to have a serious conversation with both of her parents about getting her into counseling and setting stricter boundaries. A few days later, my stepdaughter mentioned that Karen had been spreading rumors at school about how mean our family was to her. But word had already gotten around about what really happened, and most of the kids said Karen was completely out of line for trying to throw a party at someone else's house without permission. 2 weeks later, my dad ran into Karen at the grocery store. She was with her grandmother, and when she saw him, she immediately looked down at the floor. Her grandmother made her apologize for her rude behavior and for lying about the pool party. Karen apologized for being disrespectful to him and for lying about the party. My dad said he accepted her apology but told her she needed to understand that actions have results. He said she couldn't just take what wasn't hers or use other people's property without permission. Karen's grandmother thanked my dad for handling the situation appropriately and said Karen was now in counseling and doing community service after her shoplifting incident. My stepdaughter never had any more problems with Karen after that. Karen switched to a different lunch period to avoid running into my stepdaughter at school. My cousin has always been way more into social media and online stuff than me. I'm 32 and just use the internet for basic things like work emails and checking the weather. She's constantly on her phone, always talking about different celebrities and their drama. I figured it was just typical young person stuff and didn't think much of it. Everything changed about 6 months ago when I was scrolling through my social media and noticed that one of my posts had been liked by an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was some random celebrity photo, and the username was something like exposing fake queen or something equally dramatic. When I clicked on it out of curiosity, I was shocked to see it was my cousin's account. What I found there made my stomach turn. This wasn't just being a fan of celebrities. This was pure hatred, disguised as entertainment. She had dedicated her entire online presence to viciously attacking multiple celebrities, calling them horrible names, making up cruel nicknames, and posting the most vile comments I'd ever seen. She was calling other fans mentally ill and saying they should be locked up in psychiatric facilities. She used slurs against people she'd never met. She made jokes about celebrities' appearances, their families, their personal struggles. The worst part was seeing how she talked about fans of these celebrities. She called them crazy, stupid, and used language that made me feel sick. My daughter happens to like some of the singers my cousin was attacking, and I kept imagining her seeing this kind of hatred directed at something she enjoyed. I took screenshots of some of the worst posts because I could barely believe what I was reading. This wasn't the cousin I thought I knew. The person who had been watching my daughter, playing games with her, and seeming so sweet and caring was spending her free time spreading this level of cruelty online. I stopped asking her to babysit after that. I made excuses about having other arrangements. But really, I just couldn't bear the thought of leaving my daughter with someone who thought it was fun to be so nasty to other people. What if she said something cruel to my kid? What if she taught her that this kind of behavior was normal or acceptable? A few weeks ago, she brought up babysitting again. She was complaining about money troubles and how she was trying to save up for a new car but couldn't find steady work. She told me she had been thinking and could make herself more available for babysitting if I needed her. She said she really needed the extra income right now. I thanked her but told her we had a regular sitter now and were all set. She seemed confused and said that was okay, but pointed out that I used to ask her all the time. She wanted to know if something had happened or if she had done something wrong when she was watching my daughter. I tried to brush it off and make it seem like it was just a scheduling thing, but she kept pushing. She said I was obviously avoiding asking her and told me to just say what was going on. I said it was really nothing personal and that the current arrangement just worked better for us. She said that was obviously not true and that I was lying to her. She reminded me we were family and told me to just be honest about whatever the problem was. I finally gave in and told her the truth. I explained that I had seen her online account, the one where she spent all her time attacking celebrities and their fans. I said that after seeing the kind of things she posted, I realized I didn't want someone who thought it was fun to be cruel to people watching my daughter. She completely lost it. She asked if I was seriously policing what she did online and said it was just jokes. She told me I needed to learn how to take a joke and stop being so uptight. I said that calling people slurs and saying they should be locked up wasn't a joke and was just mean. She said I was being ridiculous and that everyone did this kind of stuff online, and she insisted it wasn't that serious. That's when I pulled out my phone and started reading some of her posts out loud. I won't repeat the exact words here, but they were truly awful. Calling celebrities disgusting names, making fun of their appearances, using slurs against their fans, suggesting violent things should happen to them. The room went completely quiet. Other family members who were there looked horrified. She yelled at me to stop and said I was taking everything out of context. She accused me of being on my high horse and acting like I was perfect. I told her I wasn't perfect, but I didn't spend my time online being horrible to people for fun. She said she bet if she went through my internet history, she could find stuff I wouldn't be proud of. I told her to go ahead and look because she wouldn't find me calling people slurs or telling them they should be hurt. She was getting more and more defensive and angry. She said I was just old and out of touch and that I didn't understand how the internet worked. She claimed this was normal and that I was overreacting because I didn't live my life online like everyone else did. I pointed out that we had a gay cousin in this family, and she was using slurs against strangers online. I asked her how. That was just a joke. She said everything she posted was obviously not serious, and that anyone with half a brain could see it was just entertainment. The other family members started chiming in, and they were all on my side. They were disgusted by the things she had written. My aunt, her own mother, looked mortified. She accused us all of ganging up on her and said she couldn't believe we were making such a big deal out of this. She insisted it wasn't affecting anyone in real life. I told her it was affecting real life because it was affecting whether I trusted her around my daughter. I said honestly, she should be ashamed of herself for thinking this kind of cruelty was entertaining. She stormed out, but not before throwing one last tantrum. She told me to keep my precious babysitting job and said she didn't want to watch my kid anyway if I was going to be this controlling and judgmental. A few days later, I got a long text from her trying to justify everything again, saying I was taking things too seriously and that she was just having fun. She said I was ruining our family relationship over something stupid. But here's the thing that really got to me. She never once apologized. Not for the cruel things she wrote, not for the way she spoke to me, nothing. She just kept insisting that I was wrong for having a problem with it. The final straw came when other family members started looking at her account after our confrontation. They found posts where she had been making fun of our own family members, including some pretty cruel comments about our elderly grandmother's appearance and our younger cousin who struggles with anxiety. When confronted about this, she claimed it was just venting and that everyone talks about their family sometimes. But there's a difference between privately complaining to a friend and posting mean comments about your grandmother for strangers online to see and laugh at. My aunt ended up cutting off her allowance, and several other family members stopped inviting her to gatherings. She's been trying to paint herself as the victim, saying we're all being too sensitive and that she's being unfairly punished for harmless fun. But honestly, I feel like I dodged a bullet. My aunt had been pestering me for weeks about this family dinner at some fancy steakhouse downtown. She kept saying how we needed to reconnect as a family and how her son really wanted to see me. I should have known something was up. My cousin is 12 years old and has been spoiled rotten his entire life. Every family gathering ends the same way. Him throwing tantrums when he doesn't get what he wants, and my aunt giving in to every demand. But I figured, why not? I've been working overtime for 3 weeks straight, and I could finally afford to treat myself to a nice dinner. I even put on my one good dress shirt and drove across town to meet them at this place called the Silver Fork. When I arrived, they were already seated at a booth near the back. My cousin was playing some loud game on his tablet while my aunt scrolled through her phone. Neither of them looked up when I approached. I apologized for being a few minutes late and mentioned that traffic was crazy. My aunt finally looked up, appearing annoyed, and told me I was actually 10 minutes late and that they'd been waiting. I slid into the booth across from them, trying to keep things pleasant by commenting that the place looked nice. The waiter came over and handed us menus. I looked through the options, mentally calculating what I could afford. The ribeye caught my eye, $28, which was more than I usually spend on groceries for a week, but I've been craving a good steak for months. When the waiter asked what we wanted to drink, my aunt ordered 2 Cokes and a beer for me without asking what I wanted. I just nodded along. When it came time to order, I went first and asked for the ribeye, medium rare, with the loaded mashed potatoes. My cousin looked up from his tablet and told his mom he wanted that too. My aunt reminded him that he'd said he wanted chicken nuggets earlier. My cousin said he'd changed his mind and wanted the steak instead. My aunt looked uncomfortable and pointed out that the steak was kind of expensive. My cousin got louder, insisting he wanted it because I was getting it. My aunt suggested the kid's steak, explaining it was smaller, but still really good. My cousin refused, saying he wanted the big one like mine. The waiter stood there awkwardly while my cousin started getting worked up. Other diners were beginning to stare. My aunt finally gave in and told the waiter to just get the chicken nuggets for now, saying they'd figure something out. My cousin slumped back in his seat, looking at me like this was somehow my fault. When our food arrived, my steak looked perfect. It had been months since I'd had anything this nice, and I was genuinely excited to eat it. I cut into it and took my first bite, savoring the flavor. That's when my cousin started staring at my plate with this intense look. He told his mom that my steak looked really good. She told him to eat his nuggets. He said he didn't want nuggets and wanted my steak instead. I tried to lighten the mood by saying the nuggets looked pretty good too. My cousin said he didn't care and wanted steak. My aunt turned to me with this expectant look and suggested that maybe I could share with him since he was just a kid. I said I could let him try a bite if he wanted. My aunt clarified that he was really hungry and maybe I could let him have most of it, pointing out that I was an adult and could handle being a little hungry. I nearly choked on my water and asked if she meant most of it. I explained that the steak cost me $28 and I'd worked extra shifts to afford this dinner. My aunt told me not to be selfish and reminded me that he was my cousin, saying, "Family takes care of family." I pointed out that he'd had the chance to order steak when we got here, and she'd said no because it was too expensive. My aunt's voice got sharp when she said that was different because they didn't know how good mine would look. My cousin started whining, telling his mom he wanted it and demanding she make me give it to him. I said I was sorry, but I wasn't giving him my entire steak because I'd worked hard for this. My aunt accused me of being incredibly selfish and reminded me he was just a child. I replied that I was an adult who paid for my own food. My cousin got louder, complaining that it wasn't fair and asking why I got steak and he didn't. My aunt blamed me, saying it was because I was being mean and wouldn't share. I kept eating, trying to ignore them both. I'd only managed to eat about a quarter of my steak when my aunt suddenly moved to the seat right next to me. She said she couldn't believe how selfish I was being and reminded me this was a family dinner. I said I'd offered to let him try a bite, and that was sharing. My aunt said a bite wasn't enough because he wanted the whole thing, suggesting I could order something else. I asked what money she expected me to use since I'd already paid for this meal. She said she was sure I could afford it since I had 2 jobs. I explained that having two jobs didn't make me rich and that I had bills to pay. My cousin started crying and begged his mom to make me give it to him. My aunt demanded I give him the steak right now. I refused. What happened next was so fast I barely processed it. My aunt grabbed the fork from her salad plate and jabbed it hard into my thigh. I felt the prongs break through my pants and sink into my leg. I screamed and jumped up, asking what the hell was wrong with her. The pain was immediate and intense. I looked down and saw blood seeping through my pants where the fork had gone in. The fork was still sticking out of my leg. My aunt said that maybe now I'd learn to share. The entire restaurant went silent. Everyone was staring at us. The manager came rushing over and asked what was going on. I told him she'd stabbed me with a fork and pointed at my leg where the fork was still embedded. The manager's eyes went wide. The manager said, "Oh my God," and told someone to call 911. My aunt explained that I was being selfish with my food and she was just trying to teach me a lesson. The manager said she'd stabbed someone with a fork. My cousin was crying loudly now, but not because he was upset about what happened. He was crying because all the adults were paying attention to me instead of him. Through his tears, he said he still wanted the steak. A waiter was already on the phone with emergency services. Another employee brought over a first aid kit, but no one wanted to touch the fork in case it made things worse. The manager told my aunt she needed to stay right here until the police arrived. My aunt said this was ridiculous and it was just a small wound, insisting I be fine. I asked her who stabbed someone, pointing out that she'd actually stabbed me. She said I was being selfish and setting a bad example for her son. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They carefully removed the fork and bandaged my leg, then loaded me onto a stretcher. When they wheeled me out, I could see the police officers putting handcuffs on my aunt while she argued with them. My aunt complained that this was police brutality and she'd barely touched me. My cousin asked if he could have my steak now. At the hospital, it took 12 stitches to close the wound. The doctor said I was lucky the fork didn't hit any major blood vessels or nerves. I'd have to stay off my feet for a few days and keep the wound clean and dry. The police officer who took my statement seemed puzzled. He said that in his 15 years on the job, this was definitely a first. I explained that she'd stabbed me because I wouldn't give her son my steak. The whole steak, not just a bite. He asked if the kid had his own food, and I told him about the chicken nuggets and how my cousin had decided he wanted mine instead. My aunt was charged with assault with a weapon. The restaurant banned her for life and comped my meal, which felt like a small victory. My cousin apparently threw such a massive tantrum at the police station that they had to call my uncle to come get him. I pressed charges. No way was I letting this slide. The whole thing cost me 3 days of work, medical bills, and a pair of pants that had to be thrown away. My aunt had to pay for the steak anyway when the restaurant added it to her bill along with the other charges for the disruption. Turns out that $28 ribeye ended up costing her a lot more than that. I never did finish that steak. I was living in a tiny studio apartment that was way too expensive for what it was. The place was basically falling apart and my landlord kept raising the rent. I was barely making ends meet and really needed to find somewhere cheaper to live. Around the same time, Karen reached out to me even though we hadn't talked much since she quit the job. She said she and her fiancé were looking for a roommate to help them afford this house they wanted to rent. Karen told me that she and her fiancé were trying to rent this amazing house with a big yard for their dogs. She said they really needed a third person to make it work financially and asked if I was interested. I told her that sounded great since I was looking to move somewhere cheaper and asked what the setup was like. She explained it was perfect with 3 bedrooms upstairs and 1 big bedroom downstairs. She said I would get the downstairs room, which was actually the biggest. She mentioned they had 2 large dogs and one was still a puppy, but they were super well behaved. I told her I had 2 cats and asked if that would be a problem. She assured me it would be totally fine, and that all animals were welcome. Her fiancé seemed nice too when I met him. They both acted like the most reasonable, friendly people ever during our initial meetings. The house was actually really nice when we moved in during October. It had a big living room, decent kitchen, and like she said, the downstairs bedroom was huge. I was excited about finally having more space and paying less rent. Karen took one of the upstairs bedrooms as her office. She and her fiancé shared another bedroom, and then they used the third bedroom as some kind of getting ready area. I thought it was weird they needed the whole extra room just for that, but whatever. My cat Mario adapted really well to the new place. He was cautious for about a week, sniffing around and staying close to me, but then he started exploring and seemed happy. Luigi, my other cat, had a much harder time. He's always been more anxious, and the two big dogs probably scared him. Luigi would only stay in my bedroom and barely came out at all. The dogs spent most of their time in the living room, so Luigi felt trapped. After about a month, Luigi finally started coming out occasionally. He'd peek around the corner and maybe walk to the kitchen, but if anyone approached him outside my bedroom, he'd bolt back to safety. I felt bad for him, so I bought these special pet gates that have little openings cats can squeeze through but dogs can't. That way we could separate the animals when needed, and Luigi could have some space without the dogs bothering him. It took Luigi almost 2 months, but he finally got comfortable enough to start exploring upstairs. I was so happy to see him gaining confidence and actually using the whole house. That happiness didn't last long. One day I came home from work and Karen was absolutely furious. She yelled at me that my cat was in her office that day. She said she found him on her desk walking all over her papers. I apologized and told her he was just finally getting comfortable exploring. I offered to buy a gate for the stairs so the cats would stay downstairs. She refused and said she wasn't having some ugly gate blocking the stairs because she would trip over it and hurt herself. I suggested that she could just close the doors to the rooms upstairs so the cats could go upstairs but couldn't actually get into her spaces. She said that wasn't possible because it gets too cold upstairs if they close the doors. I was confused because it was a modern house with good heating, but I tried to stay reasonable. I asked what she suggested then. She said it was simple and that my cats would only stay in my room and the living room from now on. I pointed out that the living room was where her dogs spent most of their time and my cats barely wanted to be in there, especially Luigi. I also mentioned they needed access to the kitchen to get to their cat tree. She told me the cat tree was not going in the living room because it was ugly and took up too much space. I asked if she was really saying my cats had to stay trapped in one room while her messy dogs got to go everywhere in the house. This is when she really showed her true colors. She told me that if I didn't like her rules, then I could get out. She said this was their house and they made the decisions. I started tearing up because I was so shocked. These people had been nothing but nice to me for months, and suddenly Karen was treating me like garbage over something so small. I had offered reasonable solutions and even said I'd pay for the gate myself. She asked me mockingly if I was going to cry about it now. I told her I was upset because I might be losing my housing situation, and yes, I was emotional about that. She said too bad and that those were the rules now. Her fiancé just stood there and didn't say anything. I realized these people had completely switched up on me and I didn't feel safe leaving my cats there anymore, especially with how Karen was acting. In mid-December, I packed up my cats and took them to my parents' house. I spent the next few weeks packing all my stuff and officially moved out. In January, we had to amend the lease to remove my name. There was a $300 fee to do this, and since they were the ones who wanted me out, I said they should pay it. Karen told me they weren't paying that fee because I was the one leaving. I said fine, I would pay the $300 fee, but then they needed to give me back my $700 portion of the security deposit. She said of course, that was my money. Her fiancé agreed too, and we put all of this in text messages. The deal was simple. I pay the fee to get off the lease. They give me back my security deposit money on the day I officially sign off. That was it. The day came in January when I was supposed to sign off the lease and get my money. Instead, I got a text from Karen saying I wasn't getting any money from them because I left the room a mess. I had vacuumed the room and taken all my stuff. I even took photos and video of how I left it just in case. I texted back telling them I had photos showing I left the room clean and that I would see them in court. Karen replied saying there was no way I could afford court and that I had zero case. She told me good luck with that. They actually laughed at me through text. That's when I decided I was definitely taking them to small claims court. I had to pay $90 for certified mail service, which they avoided. Then I had to pay another $90 for process servers because they wouldn't accept the court papers. I was spending money I didn't really have, but I was so angry about how they treated me. The day of court finally came and I was nervous but felt confident I had a good case. I got there early and watched some other cases. I saw how the magistrate reacted when people were disrespectful or emotional, so I decided to stay calm and stick to facts. Karen and her fiance showed up 2 minutes late. When it was my turn, I presented my case clearly. I told the judge I had text messages where they agreed to pay me back $700 if I paid the lease amendment fee. I showed him the message where she said, of course, that was my money. I also explained I had photos of how I left the room, and according to state law, landlords have 30 days to provide an itemized list of damages. I told him I never received any such list. The magistrate looked at the texts and asked to see my photos. I had to show them to Karen and her fiancé first before presenting them to the court. Then it was their turn. Karen told the magistrate that she changed her mind because I left the room in disarray. She claimed it smelled like cat urine and had stains all over the carpet. She said you could see the stains in my own photos. The magistrate examined the photos carefully and looked at the text confirmations. He said he didn't see any damage in the photos and that the only thing he could see on the carpet was vacuum lines where I clearly cleaned before leaving. I felt so relieved. Then the magistrate asked if either side had anything else to add. Karen jumped up like she had some big revelation. She told him I wasn't even kicked out and that I just left suddenly in December for no reason. The magistrate said I wasn't claiming I was kicked out and that wasn't relevant to this case. I confirmed that was correct and told him I left in December because I didn't feel my cats were safe with people who clearly didn't want them around. I said that didn't change the agreement we made about the security deposit. The magistrate made his decision. He said based on the text evidence and photos, they owed me the $700 plus the $180 in court fees. I was so happy I could barely contain myself, but then they decided to appeal, which meant going in front of a real judge instead of a magistrate. I found out some interesting things about their puppy during this time. Apparently, they didn't let it out enough and it would poop inside the house constantly, often right outside my bedroom door. They didn't like taking the dogs out in bad weather because it made their white furniture and carpets dirty. Once both dogs actually ran away because they let them off leash in the front yard near busy roads. The dogs ended up at a greenhouse rolling around in manure. Yet somehow my cats existing peacefully in the house was the problem. The appeal day finally came. I showed up to court and waited. Finally, I found out they had canceled the appeal, which meant I automatically won. Even better, they actually paid me the full amount that same day. I walked out of that courthouse with my $700 plus court fees, and more importantly, these entitled people were finally out of my life for good. I work night shifts at a warehouse across town, which means my schedule is completely backwards from most people. I get off work at 6 in the morning when everyone else is just starting their day. My friend works at an office nearby and sometimes gives me a ride home since we live in the same neighborhood. That morning he texted me saying he'd pick me up outside the little bakery on 5th Street around 8:15 since he had to stop by the bank first. I've been dealing with some pretty bad insomnia lately, probably from the weird work schedule, so I was running on about 3 hours of sleep and way too much coffee. I grabbed my usual black hoodie and jeans before heading out. The morning was chilly, so I stopped at a convenience store and got a large coffee to keep me warm while I waited. The bakery sits on a busy corner, and I found a spot by the door where I could watch for my friend's car. I was just standing there, minding my own business, checking my phone and sipping my coffee. The bakery had those metal security gates still pulled down over the windows, and there was clearly a closed sign in the door. I figured they probably didn't open until 9 or so. That's when this woman showed up. She was probably in her 40s, wearing a business suit and carrying one of those oversized designer purses. She walked right up to the door like she owned the place and started rattling the handle. She said something about how ridiculous this was. She tried the handle again, pulling harder this time like that would somehow make it unlock. She noticed me standing there and gave me this look like I was supposed to explain myself. She demanded to know if I was going to open up or not, saying it was already 8 o'clock. I was confused for a second because I had no idea what she was talking about. I told her I didn't work there. She rolled her eyes at me like I was the biggest idiot on the planet. She accused me of lying and pointed out that I was literally standing at the door. I looked down at myself. I guess from her perspective, a guy in dark clothes standing outside a business might look like an employee, but it seemed like a pretty big leap to me. I told her I was literally just loitering. I stepped aside to make it clear I wasn't blocking anything, but she just got more aggressive. She went back to yanking on the door handle like she thought she could force it open through sheer determination. She complained that this was unacceptable because she had a meeting at 8:30 and needed her usual order. I suggested that maybe they weren't open yet. She insisted they were always open by 8 and called me lazy, saying I was too lazy to do my job. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of me, which was honestly pretty weird. She threatened to report me for terrible customer service and demanded my name. I told her again that I didn't work there and was just waiting for a ride. She kept insisting I was lying and said I was dressed exactly like every other minimum wage worker she'd ever seen. I was getting pretty annoyed at this point. I work hard at my job and there's nothing wrong with any kind of honest work, but her tone was just dripping with contempt. I told her that even if I did work there, talking to people like that wasn't going to get her better service. She got even more upset and told me not to lecture her about customer service. She bragged about coming to this bakery for 3 years and spending hundreds of dollars there every month. She said she knew the owner personally. She was getting louder now, and people walking by were starting to stare. I just wanted my friend to show up so I could get out of there. She said she was calling corporate right away and that I was going to lose my job over this. I pointed out that it would be pretty hard to find a corporate number for a local bakery. That's when she really lost it. She started screaming about how I was being disrespectful and how she was going to make sure I got fired. She was waving her arms around and everything. Just then, an older man in an apron came around from the alley behind the building. He was carrying a box of supplies and had keys hanging from his belt. He took one look at the scene inside. The baker asked what was going on. Karen immediately launched into her complaint, telling him that his employee had been refusing to open the store and giving her attitude for the past 10 minutes. The baker looked at me, then back at her. He told her that they didn't open until 9 on weekdays and that I didn't work for him. He said he'd never seen me before in his life. You could see the moment it hit her that she'd been wrong this whole time. Instead of apologizing, she just got more defensive. She asked how she was supposed to know that when I was standing right by the door. The baker pointed out that the closed sign was pretty clear and mentioned they'd had the same hours posted for 5 years. She insisted this was still unacceptable and complained that the hours were completely unreasonable. She stormed off without another word, still clutching her phone like she was going to call someone important and complain. The baker shook his head and apologized to me for what had happened. He said some people just can't admit when they're wrong. I told him no worries, and that it happens to everyone. My friend pulled up right when the baker was unlocking his door. I got in the car and told him the whole story. He started laughing. He joked that only I would get yelled at for not working at a job I don't have. I said I should probably start charging for my customer service skills. A week later, I was walking past the same bakery and saw a new sign in the window that read, "We open at 9 a.m. weekdays. Please do not ask non-employees to open early." I had to laugh. I wasn't the first person to get mistaken for staff. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.